This episode of Todd-versations is brought to you by Envy, the ultimate Apple experience. Learn more about Envy at envyapple.com.
Hey everybody, how you doing today? Welcome. We are thrilled that you're hanging out with us once again. Such an honor to take a little piece of your life and hopefully fill it with a bunch of love and kindness and open your eyes and your mind and your ears to all kinds of new stuff. Like we say, I'm not here to tell you what to think, but I certainly want to put you in a position to think. And we're going to do that today. I am thrilled with my guest. He is a very big voice inside the organic industry. He's been around a very long time, not to age you, my friend, not to make it sound bad, but you've been around a long time. He's talked about a lot of things. And if you follow what he writes and you follow what he has to say, it's a good read. That's my recommendation. Check it out. Get on the Google machine. You know how to type it in there. Get on there. Get on his newsletter. He's a very worthy voice, and I'm very honored to have him here today. So please, everybody, welcome the founder of Organic Insider, the one, the only, Max Goldberg. Welcome, sir. I'm thrilled you're here.
Hey, Todd, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure, and I really appreciate a few minutes to be on your show.
Thank you, my brother. I appreciate that. Of course, you say that now. Let's get to the end and say that again. I'll feel way better. But I'm excited because you are a big voice in this industry, and you're certainly one that a lot of people pay attention to. You always have been. You know, the folks that you have that quote you, or some big names that are out there that talk about what you do and the leadership that you provide, and the leadership with the pen, which is incredibly important. And I think that it's we need more voices like that out there. You know, again, making people think, making people stop and pause and wonder, because we don't do enough of it, right? We steam through life, and it's just sometimes we need that stop and pause moment and those bright ideas like you throw out to people. So thank you again for being here. Let's get started. Let's get rolling. You know, as I do with all my guests, I don't read people's bios because they have a tendency to have too many big words, and I don't want to take that and I'll screw it up. So I'd rather have you do it. It's better from your heart than mine anyway. So if you wouldn't mind, just share briefly with everybody a little bit of your journey and bio and how I roped you into hanging with me.
Well, again, thanks for having me, Todd. So my story is, I did not study journalism in college. After college, I went to work on Wall Street in investment banking and sort of fell into what I'm doing in the end of 2009, beginning of 2010. But I first found organic truly found organic was in the summer of 2001. And that's when I was dating a woman, and we went to go visit her naturopath. This was in New Mexico. And all of a sudden, I met the naturopath. I said, don't we need all the chemicals to kill all the bugs? And she's like, no, we don't. And I remember vividly, I went back to New York City. I was living in New York at the time. Went back and researched it, and I was like, wow, I couldn't believe the stuff that was being sprayed on our food and the GMOs. And ever since that time in the summer of 2001, I've been eating close to 100% organic. And several years later, I had a guy who wanted to invest in me and open up a chain of coffee shops, essentially Starbucks, but organic. And in 2004, I went to work at Starbucks for 3 months, and I realized I didn't want to be in the coffee business. I didn't even drink coffee. And I figured, okay, so I am just going to be, I didn't even know that these trade shows, Natural Products Expo East, Expo West, I didn't even know that they existed. And then several years later, blogging started to take off, and someone recommended to me that I start a green blog. And I was like, I don't really want to start a green blog. If I do anything, I want to start an organic food blog. That's what I really care about. And it just so happened right around that time, I was in Boston at the time, and Natural Products Expo East, the second largest trade show in the industry, was taking place in Boston literally that day. That was like the first day. I got the cell phone number of the woman who ran the press room. I told her who I was. I said, I don't have a website. I don't have business cards. I have nothing, but can I come? And she was like, sure, come and call me and I'll get you in. This was, Twitter had just started and Facebook had just started. There was no Instagram, and LinkedIn was still very early. And I don't think there were a lot of people begging their way into these trade shows like it is now, where it's very, very popular. So that's kind of started the journey. And I put up a blog, Living Maxwell, and I ended up moving back to New York and just made a decision. I said, I'm going to make myself known. And I just started showing up everywhere. I'd go to every event. And the organic scene in New York City at that time was very vibrant. This was when Organic Avenue was starting to come into its own. Juice Press had just started. The organic community and scene in New York City was very, very vibrant. a good number of organic restaurants. And then I just started going to the shows. I had already been to Expo East. So I went to Natural Products Expo West, and I just went to one show after the next. And I remember showing up, and people had no idea who I was. And then they'd see me at one show and another show and another show. And all of a sudden they started recognizing me. I got some good press at the New York Times. And the other big thing that happened was, I got into organic food like most people for personal reasons, because of what organic would mean for my own health. Sure. And when I got into the industry and really started understanding what was going on, I realized the injustices that were taking place with particularly the pesticides and how that was impacting the farm workers and the GMO contamination and the lack of GMO labeling. And then I think it was 2012 where GMO labeling became the issue in the industry. And California had the Prop 37, that ballot initiative. And I got involved and put on several fundraisers for that and other GMO labeling initiatives throughout the country. And so activism really became the guiding force. It was the reason I was doing everything. And then a few years later, this was in 2016, I said, I had my organic blog, Living Maxwell. And then I said, and I run the organic food industry group on LinkedIn, which we've about 40,000 members right now. And back then, Todd, you could send out a weekly email to the group. You can't do that anymore. But back then you could send out a weekly email. And we used to have meetups at Expo West. The first year we had 6 people, then we had like 40, and the biggest was like 90 people. So we don't do the meetups anymore. But I said, I was speaking to too many CEOs who didn't know what glyphosate was, who didn't know what was going, they didn't know what was going on in the industry politically. Yeah. That's where, really I live. And I said, okay, if I can create a newsletter, essentially doing what I was doing on LinkedIn, I would have a curated links and what, a little bit of commentary, not much. Said, if I can take that off of LinkedIn, create my own newsletter, and if the CEOs and founders actually read it each week, they would have a good idea of what was going on. And that's how Organic Insider was started. And it's this fall will be 7 years with that. And really that's sort of my journey in organic.
I love it. Well, Organic Insider is a great read. Like I said before, and to your point, there's a lot of people that read it. There's a lot of people that use that as a source of what do I need to be paying attention to. And you said something I want to come alongside. It was like, if you're CEO of a company, you have so many moving parts, and staying informed is a hard part of being a CEO about a multiplicity of issues, why you have staff, why you have people around you. So to have something like the Organic Insider to kind of fuel their curiosity, to spark some conversation, to ask questions downstream within their own structure, I think is incredibly valuable. So kudos to what you've done in the journey. And I'm glad I'm glad it's been however many years and you've been continuing to go. But it's funny because you bring up Expo West. So I go so far back, I can remember when Expo West did fit inside the Anaheim Convention Center, and it was only on one floor, and it wasn't 17 floors and 17 buildings with 17 million people. A totally difference to watch that industry explode and take off. Let's get into it a little bit. Let's talk about this industry. I want to pick your brain a little bit and start talking about stuff. What are the things that excite you today, in the industry?
Well, two of the things that I'm really excited about are, and there's a lot to be concerned about, and people who are in this industry, you can get really depressed if you let it get to you. But what I do say when I do talk about all the things that I'm concerned about, which I'm sure we will get to, is the 2 add-on labels. One is called Regenerative Organic Certified, which was started by Dr. Bronner's Patagonia and Rodale Institute, and the other one is called Real Organic Project, which was started by small organic farmers, mostly in the Northeast. It's a national organization. It's on the way to being international. Small organic farmers who grow in the soil. And those are the things, those 2 add-on labels are what I am most excited about in the industry right now, because these are people who are really, really committed to organic and are going to help it survive and thrive for many years to come. So some people might be saying, well, what is an add-on label? What does this all mean? So these are labels that are added onto a product that has the USDA organic seal.
Right.
The organic seal, the USDA organic is the baseline. And so for regenerative organic certified, soil health, worker fairness, and animal welfare, those are the three pillars. So it's a
Right.
regenerative organic standard. And Real Organic Project, the primary things are no hydroponics, and hydroponics is not allowed in regenerative organic certified. No hydroponics and no factory farms in organic. So those are the two key things for Real Organic Project, and regenerative organic certified. It has those three pillars. So Real Organic Project primarily has been a farmer certified labels up to this point. That is going to be changing. They have about 1,250 farms that have been certified in the country. And then regenerative organic certified, ROC, has, I think the numbers up to, it's 100+ brands right now. So Nature's Path has an ROC, instant oatmeal, and Dr. Bronner's has an ROC. Coconut oil and Patagonia's got the ROC, mango slices, and so there are, Lotus Foods has an ROC rice. I know I'm missing many.
Well, there's a bunch of them. Yeah, no.
There's a lot. So it's growing. So I'm really excited about this, because ROC is, and Real Organic Project too, is really raising the bar for what organic represents. And these are people who are incredibly committed to really protecting and furthering organic.
Yeah, cool. I love it. Well, I'm going to dive into all of that a little bit, but I figured if we're at this point, let's find out what concerns you. Let's get them all to get what excites you, and let's talk about what concerns you, and then we'll take it from there.
Well, if we getting back to why Real Organic Project was formed was, and ROC too, was the USDA, the Organic Food Production Act of 1990 has language in there. It says farmers must have a management plan that fosters soil fertility. Section 6513. I mean, that's what it says. You have to have a management plan that fosters soil fertility. Yet the USDA is allowing hydroponic operations in organic. It's a complete and total violation of the organic rules, and the USDA is allowing it. So what happens is the following: is that consumers, so if you're growing in hydroponic, these are massive operations, and they're putting soil grown farmers out of business. They're putting them out of business. The soil grown farmers cannot compete.
Can you tell me, can you give me an instance of that? Because I'm not hip to their scale. I mean, are you talking about like tomato guys? Or are you talking about
berries,
somebody doing lettuce?
Berries, blueberries are very hard to find nationally that are grown in the soil. Are there soil grown organic berries? Yes, but it's becoming increasingly more difficult to find. What you're going to find more often than not is hydroponic, fresh, organic blueberries.
Yeah, but those are container grown. But those are container grown, not hydroponic, though. Correct? I mean, I want to make sure we're clear, because
it's all the same thing. It's drip fed nutrients. And that is part of the thing, Todd, is the industry has done a masterful job of confusing everything of what is it, what the issue is. Well, if it's container, it's okay. But really all they're doing is putting peat moss or coconut coir in the container, and they're drip feeding nutrients. It's essentially the same thing as hydroponics. And this is what they've done. They've confused everyone, mostly the people on the National Organic Standards Board, thinking that, okay, but if it's container grown, it's okay. No, it's not. It's not grown in the soil. It's drip fed nutrients. It's essentially the same thing. And this is part of the lobbyist playbook, is to confuse everyone. And so everyone's confused about what it is, but the reality is it's not grown in the soil.
So, okay, let's talk on it, because I being somebody that's been around the soil my entire career, I have no issues with it. This is, there's not a right or wrong in my opinion on this. I always come from the perspective, when I thought about this career, going into organics, one of the things we talked about, 1,000 years ago, was how do you feed the world, right? Organic produce. And so while I spent my time in the soil being a part of that whole thing, I've come to the realization that organic produce isn't growing at a pace that's going to feed the world at the way we need to go with the resources that we're lacking and the things that are going on. So when I look about this, like how do we feed the world by not embracing agriculture technology? I'm agreeing with what you're saying. I'm not looking for an argument. I'm trying to get to the point of like, but how do we get there with this? Because while the USDA allows it, the courts allowed it too. It's been tried twice, and we get all that. I mean, it goes back and forth. And I don't disagree with, with the loudest voice generally gets the biggest opinion in a lot of ways. But I have to go back and ask the question, like, how do we feed the world if we don't embrace agriculture technology?
Well, I think we can feed the world through regenerative organic agriculture. I mean,
but you don't have to be you don't have to be organic to be regenerative. So that becomes really confusing as well to consumers.
Well, I think organic can feed the world. And I also believe that people are conditioned to believe that without GMOs and all this technology, we can't feed the world. And I don't buy into that.
I agree with you there. I think that's a bunch of bullshit myself. I think it becomes when you start to become Mother Nature, or you start, I think that's a problem. Working with Mother Nature is one thing. Becoming Mother Nature is a huge problem, and it's not worked out so far, and it's not going to continue to work out. I agree with you there. You're not going to get an argument with me on that, because I think it's very dangerous, without a doubt. But again, how do we do it? How do we feed the world when we don't have enough farmers? We don't have second generations farmers. We have people out that are utilizing technology. They're putting, food in a food desert. You got people growing food in Dubai, right? I've been to Dubai. You can grow a palm tree. That's pretty good. But otherwise, it's a pretty tough place to grow stuff. So to be able to put something inside to protect the environment, cut down your carbon footprint, reduce the water, all these, those are all core, pillars of what the organic movement's all about. So I struggle with that feeding the world deal. And I'm not soil is such an important part of this planet. Taking care of it is such an important tool that we need, but we can't do enough of it in the industry to feed the world. There's just not enough people coming to do the work, but there is through the technologies phase. And I think about, again, I'll use Dubai as an example. If I was in Dubai and could get food that came 50 miles from where I live, that was grown under organic practices, that I'm not going to glow at night or have any of these other issues, I have a hard time looking away from that today. My position is totally different than what it was 25, 30 years ago. But today I have a different look because, again, I'm trying to feed the world.
I think if people want to grow hydroponically, they should grow it. I have nothing against hydroponics. I just don't think it's organic. And to say, well, we need to allow hydroponics and organic to feed the world is not something I subscribe to. Right. And same thing with GMOs. There are people within the organic industry, USDA officials. Greg Eibach, former senior official at the USDA, testified in a congressional subcommittee hearing saying that we should be considering gene editing in organic. Two members of the National Organic Standards Board, who I interviewed for my newsletter, said they were very upset that they faced a lot of pressure because they wanted to bring up the discussion of GMOs in organic, but were shot down and faced a lot of pressure. They were very upset about it. I don't believe GMOs should be inorganic. I do not believe hydroponics should be inorganic. And I think we can feed the world with organic. The majority of the world are small farmers. And, people are believing this propaganda that we need all this technology to feed the world. I just don't subscribe to it.
Yeah, I don't look. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about CRISPR and all that and gene editing, because it's a scary thing. But I'll wrap up this thing when it comes to what you're saying. Organic is an amazing business. It's an amazing thought process. I look at the end of the day, I look at some of the technologies out there where you're again, back to the core pillars, your water, the different things that are benefits to what this technology brings. But the bottom line issue is the food's still organic. There's no difference in the food from a nutritional standpoint. There's no difference in the food from what's inside the food. I mean, if there is, I've not seen any kind of a studies. Somebody that's growing organically, that's growing a tomato organically in a greenhouse, to somebody that's growing a tomato outside. I mean, you've all got to follow the same rules. Again, the soil is a big part of it. And I'm not taking anything away from that argument. I just go back to that original question: how do we feed the world? And I can't get past that. That's where I'm stuck, which is why I lean into this. Like, okay, if we, but I also want to make sure that I bring the point that I believe organic has a responsibility to raise the bar in agriculture technology, and we are not doing a very good job of that. Let's be fair with that too, because we're not holding the bar.
Well, I think there are many problems with organic in terms of the rules not being enforced, and soil could be farmed a lot better. So I find it's really about, I don't have an issue with the rules in organic. It's more about, are the rules being enforced? That to me is
Totally, yeah.
of an issue. And when you say, how can we feed the world? Are people in Venezuela not being fed now because we don't have enough food in the world, or is that a political issue? I would say it's a political issue. It's not a, this was with what's going on with the war in Ukraine has obviously created disruptions, but before, and that's a political issue. So pre the Ukraine war, are people, or even now, are the people in Venezuela starving because there's not enough food in the world? I would say no, that's a joke. I say it's a political issue, not a food scarcity issue.
Well, yeah, I don't disagree that that's a part of that factor without a doubt. And I think that, well, it goes to what I talk about all the time. We just don't value food. We don't take the time to value. We don't take the time to understand in this country. And we chatted on a little bit before we flipped the cameras on. And I'm happy to kind of jump into that a little bit about how I don't believe that America truly values our food. You think about the way a kid starts out. Kids start out, their palates are developed with sugar, salt, and fat. And that is a death sentence and a trail that we go down in this country that, to your point, we have plenty of excess food, right? We throw away, every American throws away the equivalent of 650 apples each all year, that's a lot of apples in food waste, right? And so I think it does come down to what you're saying. And I think it comes down, and you brought it up earlier about these voices that are out there, again, the loudest voice generally moves the boat, right? In a lot of ways, or moves the crowd rather, not the boat. That'd be weird. But it becomes a real problem when we don't put enough energy into doing the work that you're doing, which is educating people, putting these things out there for people to debate and to think and to wrap their minds around. Because I think it's the only way we're going to change to the ultimate goal, which is what I keep going back to, which we've talked about. It's like, how are we going to feed the world organic produce? By telling them why they need to be invested in this, what this all means, and why it doesn't matter. And starting off kids with sugar, salt, and fat is not the solution, in my opinion.
Yeah, and when people say, well, we need GMOs to feed the world, it's, you look at the Rodale, the 40-year study they have where they've done side by side studies of organic and GMO, and the yields are not meaningfully different. And then you just from a purely intellectual standpoint, you've got organic farmers who are about supporting local communities and soil health, and you've got GMOs, which are patent protected. It's all about profits. It's about selling more chemicals. So just from a purely intellectual standpoint, is that a better way to go? Or is it, or is organic a better way to go? And it's all about patents and corporate profits and control of the food supply. So that is the system that we are being told we need to feed the world. And just, if you don't know anything, does that sound right? Doesn't sound right.
Yeah, no. Well, to quote the great George Carlin, right? Tyranny is a natural progression of civilization. Quite frankly. And but it goes back to what we, basically the whole premise of why I wanted you to come on is to put these conversations up. But we've got to get people minds wrapped around these things. And whether you and I don't agree on the hydroponic, it doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is at least people are like, well, what do I think about this now? And I think that's what's powerful is when we give people that opportunity to think, which is why I think you do such a great job of putting that out in your newsletter that you throw out to everybody. It's like I said, why it's such a great read. Let's get into some of this crazy crap. I'm sorry, if you want to say something, go ahead. I'll keep my mouth shut a second.
Well, just on this hydroponics issue, what people should do is, because some people might be hearing this for the first time and saying, wait a second, my berries and my tomatoes and my leafy greens are not grown in the soil. They're grown in water. Yeah, they might be. What you should do is you should go check out and a lot of the companies are not too forthcoming. Not going to mention names, but some of the big companies make it very confusing to know if they are growing hydroponically, the organic ones, if they are growing hydroponically or in the soil. But you can go to Real Organic Project and see if they are Real Organic Project certified, because if they're ROP certified, that means they are growing in the soil. Right. So that's something for consumers to know about.
Well, but to be fair, because 85% of your organic tomatoes are coming out of a greenhouse today in this country.
Yeah, but greenhouse can be soil.
Well, it could be soilless too, right? But I mean, you put it into a 5-pound bag of soil. I mean, is that close enough? I mean, what's the difference between a 5-pound bag of soil and a tomato and, putting a plug of lettuce into, a medium whatever,
Well,
hydroponically.
you're growing it in the soil, and you are getting the microbes of the soil that just that do not exist in water. I mean, that's the big thing. You said, well, how do we know? It's like, well, we don't even know the billions and trillions of microbiota in the soil. We don't even know what is there to really fully understand everything. And that just simply cannot be duplicated, I believe, in hydroponics. And maybe you get some of the macronutrients that are similar. I do not believe you can replicate the microbiome that's in the soil in a plastic bucket of water.
And I think that I would defer that. I think that there is stuff out there now that talks about what they can do from a microbiome standpoint, what they can create, and how they've been able to do it. I mean, technology is advancing so fast. Doesn't take away from the fact we still need soil. It doesn't take for that soil, helps with carbon and all the other important things that soil does. But my position is until I'm convinced that we have enough organic dirt farmers that are going to feed the world and change this narrative in our country, I don't see how we can look away from it again. But I want us to raise the bar. I'm not saying do it to do it. I'm saying raise the bar. And one of the things the industry won't do, they won't come together to raise the bar, which is insane to me.
Well, I think we would have more soil-grown organic farmers if they could see a bright future and these rules were being enforced. When the rules are not being enforced, and let's talk about dairy for a second, with these are small organic dairy farmers going out of business. Why are these family farmers selling off their land? The kids are not getting into it because they don't see a future in it. Why is that? Because the USDA is allowing these massive organic factory farms in Texas and Arizona that are the antithesis of what organic dairy was supposed to be. So the rules are not being enforced, which makes it difficult for these small operators who are doing the right thing to stay in business. So that could explain partially why we are struggling to find more organic farmers.
Yeah, well, you're right. It's a tough business. It's easier to sell your ground, to real estate than it is to keep going. I see that here. I've seen it. It's just happening. It's just happened here in my own community, where it's like, hey, we are the second generation and we're gone. We're going to sell this. We're going to make a fortune, or they're going to hold back the water. They're going to do their different things. I mean, it's just, again, it's capitalism at its finest. It's one of the parts about capitalism that kind of freaks you out because they don't think about the long game of what they're doing in some of this, especially when it comes to our food, because food insecurity is probably one of the biggest threats and scariest things out there. There's a lot of other threats and scary things, but being a country that's food insecure, that's a problem. That's a real big problem.
And, one of the things I really try to do in Organic Insider, I really try to represent the voices of small organic farmers.
Yeah.
Because they are so marginalized in our industry and so disrespected. Whenever these big CPG companies sell for hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, that's not possible without these farmers. Without the farmers, there's no food and there are no CPG companies. And yet when big CPG companies cash out for hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, that doesn't trickle down to the farmers. I mean, they are barely making a living.
It's a tough living. There's no two ways about it. I have all the respect in the world for anybody that's in the agriculture space, period. I don't care if you're organic or you're not. I think that you take that responsibility on to uplift your country on your shoulders and feed people. That's something that I think needs more respect all the way across the board.
And I really hope people, when they go to the market, supermarket or the farmer's market, and if organic is more expensive, they start thinking, well, I can afford the extra 10 cents or 20 cents a pound of whatever I'm buying because this is going to support an organic farmer doing it the right way. As you mentioned, we're so conditioned in this country that food is supposed to be cheap. And really we need to change the paradigm. Food is not supposed to be cheap. Food should be expensive. Well,
cheap has a hidden cost, and we're paying for that in so many ways, right? Whether it's healthcare, whether it's environmental, whatever it is. Yeah, no, look, I goes back to what I said earlier about the understanding the real value of food. And I think the only way that we're going to make the fastest, most positive change is by working with our kids through the school systems and trying to get kids to better understand the real value of what food is. I think, to me, that's the fastest, most effective lift, because not only do you change their health, you change the climate, you change resources, you open up the world to a whole nother thing. And it goes back to what I said and what I firmly believe is, like, how are we going to feed the world organic produce? And the aliens. I can't leave the aliens out, Max, because they're coming, and I'm assuming they're going to eat organic. That's just my thought.
What do you mean they're coming? They're already here.
Well, I know they are, but we don't actually. Well, we have I can pick out a few. There's a few people I think, yeah, I think he might be an alien. Elon, maybe Elon. He may not be from here. I'm thinking maybe Steve Jobs, another one, may not have been from here. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it plays out. Just talk a little bit, if we can, because you and I went back and forth on an exchange about what's coming next. And I think that freaks me out a little bit, which is this, what's called CRISPR, right? Clustered regulatory interspaced short. I got to look. I tried to do it off the top of my head. I can't do it. I ain't that good. Pandodromic repeats, which I don't even know what the hell that means. Basically, it's just a bunch of DNA sequencing and adding and removing genes into things, which again goes back to my freak out about being Mother Nature as opposed to working with Mother Nature. But this is really wild stuff because you're tweaking the genetic code of product now, right? And it, when you change the code, you own the code. So that becomes a weird deal. So, it spreads to other farms. We've seen that with the GMO thing. We've seen what that does. We try to suppress Mother Nature. It has not worked. It will not work. It has not worked since the dawn of time. It will not work past our time to mess with her. So talk to me a little bit about some of this stuff that you're seeing with this CRISPR and this gene editing. GMOs has been around for a long time and continues to be talked about and still thrown in our faces without really knowing anything about it. But if you wouldn't mind, talk about that a little bit. How's that making you feel these days?
I think it's the biggest threat to organic that we face, period. And I don't think people understand the difference between gene-edited foods and traditional GMOs. So why don't we talk about that? So traditional GMOs, GMO corn, soy, canola, things like that. What they're doing is they're taking DNA from bacteria from one organism and putting it into a different organism. So it's transgenic. That's been the traditional GMOs. Gene edited. I was in the elevator the other day with a very famous chef, and I said to her, what do you think about gene edited foods? Oh, no, we don't use any of that. I'm not really sure she knew. I don't think most people really understand the difference. I think she meant genetically engineered food. Yes, right. Gene edited foods are genetically engineered, but they're different in that the gene edited foods, they're not taking DNA from foreign organisms. They're going into the plant and they're rearranging the genetic code.
Right.
And so because of that, because of the something called the plant pest criteria or regulation, this is because they're going in and actually rearranging and not adding anything new from the outside. They are able to avoid all regulation that traditional GMOs have come under, and they're getting patents, and they're gene editing greens, and they're gene editing pigs. They're going to gene edit literally everything. And why is it dangerous? Number one, nothing's going to be labeled as GMO, so you're not going to know that you're eating a genetically engineered food. Number two, it's going to contaminate conventional and organic farms. We've seen the GMO contamination issue with canola oil, for example, among other things. So these gene-edited foods, the contamination could be a real problem. And, these gene editing processes are not foolproof. They're not exact. Mistakes can happen. I interviewed the guy, his name is Caius Ramans. He's a PhD. He worked at Monsanto and Simplot, I believe. He's the guy who invented the genetically engineered potato that doesn't bruise. And he really had regrets after the fact, and he wrote a book, and he's in hiding now. He is, as far as I know, he's not available. He's off the grid. Maybe he's come back. I don't know, but he was at the time. And he really started to question, why did he do these things? And he really started to regret it. He's like, why are we changing something that has evolved over evolution, that a vegetable expresses certain traits for a reason? And then so these people who are doing gene editing have decided, no, we are going to change Mother Nature, and we are going to make changes and based on what we think it should be, not what is allowed with, say, under crossbreeding, for example. Right. So these people are playing God with our food supply, and the danger is, A, it's not going to be labeled. You're not going to know it. They're selling in different service. So none of that gets labeled. And people really are not going to be the people who are serving it. They probably think they're doing a good thing. Oh, it's going to be, we're told it has more nutrition, or it expresses, this has more vitamin C, or whatever the trait is. We don't know what the long-term human health risks are. We don't know how safe it is on a long-term basis. Number two, it's not going to be labeled. And number three, it has the real potential to contaminate the organic food supply.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And you said something, I got to touch on it. This, to me, is exactly how we've handled the pesticide issue in this country. It's fine until it's not. And then we'll take it off the market, let alone, right? I mean, how many different things can you cite that are exactly fill that category? And I think this is the exact same thing, because you're right. It does not need to be labeled, because it's not considered GMO, because there's no genetic material added, right? It's working inside of stuff. Again, and I'm concerned that this is something that the organic industry is going to land into, or be forced into, or a runway will be created that is very easy to get into. And that, I think, is something that we've got to be very, very careful about. The GMO thing is creeping into the system right now with a lot of conversation, which was, I remember when that was a big part of 1990 and that whole debate and conversation about what that all was and how that first started. And some of the companies were leaning into it. They're not really around any longer. So I agree with you that this is going to be a really big concern. But, when you think about the organic sector, you touched on a little bit. I like it a little bit deeper. You think this is reality? You think that the industry itself is going to look away from, look away from the light and squeak something like this through? Because, they're talking about things like taking the seeds out of a blackberry, taking the bite out of a radish, or a green to make it a little more palatable. Those are the things they're starting with. That's just a tipping point of where it's going to go.
I think gene editing is going to be absolutely I think everything's going to be gene edited, and it's a real concern in terms of organic. As I mentioned before, this former USDA official, Greg Eibach, maybe we can link to it in the show notes.
Yeah.
There's a video of him testifying at a congressional subcommittee hearing, saying we should be considering gene editing in organic. I interviewed, as I mentioned, 2 NOSB, National Organic Standards Board members, who believe we should be discussing genetic engineering in organic. So anyone who thinks that, GMOs in organic will never happen, I mean, you're wrong. It's being discussed now. So the first thing of it getting into organic is having a discussion about it. So no one can dismiss the possibility of GMOs in organic. And that's the reason we eat organic, was because we wanted an alternative system to the industrial conventional system. We wanted, people in the 60s and 70s, they wanted an alternative to what was being presented to them. And so this is the exact opposite of why organic, the movement, organic industry was started. So the possibility of GMOs in organic absolutely cannot be dismissed. It's clearly something that should never be in organic, but there are people in organic that want it.
Well, there's, again, greed is, as back to my friend George Carlin, which I love this quote. I happened to see this and I loved it, but it's, greed is always an underlying concern, and it rules a lot of decisions, right? And that's where this comes down to. It becomes about, it really, when you take a look at some of this evolution, it's more about dollars than it is about cents. And I think that's where we start to get a little bit off the rails. And when I think about this industry as a whole, from my perspective of being around the bush a few weeks now, playing in the sandbox, the industry is very fragmented in a lot of ways. I talked about it earlier about, we should be raising the bar in agriculture technology. We should be having these conversations in a more meaningful way than some of the splinteredness that we seem to have. It's what this industry's been. I think it grew too fast. I think it lacked leadership early on. I think, the money was just flying. The shelf space started happening, especially post Alar. It went pretty nuts. And I think that got us off the rails a little bit. But we are needing, I think, to try to come together. And a lot of these associations are kind of all over the place. There's not one unified voice. And I think consumers are going to suffer from that. I think the trade will suffer from that. How do we overcome some of this? I mean, how do we kind of bundle up the things we've kind of talked about, but how do we come together and tackle these issues in a way that, similar to how I try to build this platform, that we can talk and work these things out? Because there's not really a good way of doing it. Do you have any thoughts about that? How we can work to help this division?
Well, Todd,
Besides reading your newsletter. Sorry.
Well, you bring up a very good point, because for people who are not in the industry, what is going on behind the scenes is the Organic Trade Association and the consumer advocacy groups do not see eye to eye on some of the on the hot button issues.
No.
And that is a huge problem we have, is there's not alignment. There's a lot of distrust. No. And the consumer advocacy groups do not, and the Organic Trade Association, they do not see eye to eye on the major, the most important issues facing our industry. So I don't have an answer.
I don't either.
And it's a real problem, because we are going up against such a well-funded opponent in terms of the GMO industry and the chemical companies. They're so well-funded that we need to be unified, and we are not.
Yeah, no, I don't look. I look at, and I don't want to pick on anybody or what it is, but I look at, this really started with looking at the trade association as itself. It's like they don't want hydroponic, but they take dues from hydroponic members. And it's like, okay, now we're at a point of like, we're just, it's whack-a-mole now, right? It just makes no sense. And again, I just don't see us coming together to raise the bar. And I think that's where the organic industry wins, because we are an industry of alternatives. We have always been. One of my biggest regrets 1,000 years ago was that we didn't fight harder at not being so forced to be so packaged in the organic deal. We should have made the other guys be the ones that went into packaging, and we should have stayed out of it. I regret that. I wish I would have had a bigger voice and would have been able to unify, and would have been a little smarter and a little bit more wisdom under my belt to make that play, because I think we screwed everybody. I really do. I think we could have done it better, but we didn't, and now we're stuck.
Well, when you talk about raising the bar, I want to circle back to what you asked me at the beginning. What I'm so excited about is these two add-on labels, because I believe that Regenerative Organic Certified and Real Organic Project are raising the bar. So this is the USDA organic as a baseline, and they are raising the bar for what organic should be.
Yeah.
And
but there's so many of them now too. You got all these different ones they're throwing. That's where I think we get that consumer confusion. It's like, how do we come up with a good, what is going to be the benchmark standard to be or regenerative organic? How do we do it instead of being this fragmented? Because you're going to have 5 different off labels of regenerative. They're out there now. There's multiple ones that are floating around.
Well, they're not regenerative organic. They're regenerative, but they're not regenerative organic. Yes, there are a lot of labels out there, but these two are the ones that I am the most excited about, because they both use USDA organic as a baseline.
Yeah.
Others do not.
I didn't ask you, and I meant to ask you, and I know we got into the CRISPR thing, we got off on another tangent, which is great, which means I love when you get on conversations and drift apart. But Expo West, lab grown meat, because it's a trip. Do you mind touching on it really quick? I don't want to not bring that up, because I think your insight on that is incredibly valuable.
Well, the country's largest organic food show is called Natural Products Expo West.
Right.
Pre-COVID, it was 88,000 people, something. So it's a very large show.
It's crazy.
Brands, you need, some of the very established brands have stopped going, a few of them, but essentially all the brands are there. And at the keynote address in 2022, we were told that in order to feed the world lab-grown meat, the only way we're going to feed the world is from lab-grown meat. This was the keynote presentation of natural and organic. At the keynote presentation of natural and organic, we were told at Natural Products Expo West, the largest organic trade show in the country, lab-grown meat is the only way we're going to feed the world. I mean, why is this being done at the biggest organic trade show in the country? Do not understand it, but this is what the people who run the show want. They're advocating for these GMO 2.0 lab-grown meats, these types of companies. And so this is, I was moderating the panel this year at Expo West 2023, and there was a panel on the GMO 2.0, and it got very contentious. And the pro-GMO 2.0 people were in the audience, furious that they were not being represented on stage, and saying that we were distorting the truth and everything like that. So these are the kind of things that we are facing at the country's biggest organic trade show. It's something I do not understand. It's something I do not agree with. I do not think GMOs should be at this trade show. I don't put on the show. It's not up for me to decide.
Right.
This is how GMOs are infiltrating organic. As I mentioned, what happened with at the USDA, at the National Organic Standards Board, at the largest organic trade show. So for people out there who are watching, say, "Oh, GMOs will never happen," and as long as I, go to Whole Foods and buy organic each week, I'm doing my part. No, people need to be involved and need to be aware of what's going on, because organic is under massive attack, massive, from every single side.
I agree. And again, it goes by, I think it's capitalism. I think it's all the things we touched about, but I think that the organic has an opportunity to, I hope, seizes an opportunity to come together, to tackle some of these issues, to talk about these issues, to get them out in a voice that isn't so fragmented the consumer doesn't know what to do anymore. Because what's going to end up happening if the voice gets fragmented, the consumer is just going to tune it out. And that really becomes a problem, because we are talking about food. We're not talking about my Sharpie here. We're talking about food. We're talking about things that have such huge effects on so many things in our lives and on this planet. So I hope that people get their heads wrapped around it. I really, really do. I mean, that's my call to action, is how do we unify and how do we make this, how do we get people to really embrace understanding the true value of food in this country?
Yeah. I mean, people need to be involved. They need to know what's going on. And if you want to buy the highest quality organic food, look for Regenerative Organic Certified Real Organic Project. That is what I advocate for. There are other labels out there great, that Demeter and which is biodynamic, but Real Organic Project. If people can walk away from anything from this conversation today, and hopefully you can put this in the show notes or have some B-roll about what the labels look like. Regenerative Organic Certified Real Organic Project. These are two labels you need to know about. Look for them and support those farmers.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I think that people need to get involved and and start to look at our food supply for what it is, and start to really take a hard look at what the organic labels, what the organic seal is, what does it mean, what do these other ones mean, to your point, and start to figure out a better trajectory that we can take. But I think I think it's going to come down to us unifying, without a doubt, because there's so many choices that we have to make. And I think when we have so many choices around our food that we don't understand that we're making, I think it just becomes incredibly dangerous, whether it's gene editing, it's lab grown meat. Like, I've tried one of those crazy burgers in my house. It was disgusting to watch it. I mean, I could have thrown the pan away if I knew my wife wasn't going to get pissed at me for throwing the pan away. So I cleaned it. That's how bad it was. It's disgusting. Anyways, what's next for you guys? What's going on for you coming up for the rest of the year? I mean, you're going to keep writing, you're going to keep opening up eyes, you're going to keep stirring up the pot, which is wonderful. What do you got exciting coming up?
Continuing doing the work I'm doing with Organic Insider, and the big writing about, as I said, these two add-on labels, Regenerative Organic Certified Real Organic Project, talking a lot about gene editing, because I don't think people get it yet, what's going on. And there's a ton of education that we need to do. And so things are happening behind the scenes with that, and just, continuing to write about, the most important issues facing our industry, because it's so vital. Our food supply, the food is medicine, and we need to do whatever we can to protect it. And so just, continuing to do the work I'm doing and have it reach more people.
I love it. Keep going, dude. Don't stop. I mean, like I said, it pops into my inbox. I'm stoked to have it. I mean, I think you're raising the bar, you're creating conversation. And I think we've got to get people to think more, right? Especially when it comes to our food, like the basis of this platform. Like, again, I'm not going to tell you what to think, but I do want to put you in a position to think. And I hope people get on the Google machine or DuckDuckGo, and a little safer, and snoop around and start to look at some of these things we've talked about today, and ask themselves, how do I feel about, how do I value food like this? Right. I think that's a really interesting way of going about looking at stuff. How do I value this? Like, think about that when you're going through the drive-thru for 99 cents. How do I value this? What is it? right?
Exactly.
And I think it's a really powerful lesson for us to learn.
And Todd, every time we eat, we get to make a choice. We can either support organic farmers doing the right thing, supporting the environment, soil health, or we can give our money to the GMO companies and their patent protected inventions and the chemicals that they spray on it. So every single day, 2 or 3 times a day, however many times we eat, we have a choice, and we have to make a choice about where do we want our money to go.
Yeah. And I think, and it's interesting you brought that up, and it kind of makes me think a little bit about back to what I said earlier about educating the kids and starting, because, there's no reason why a bodega in the inner cities cannot have fruits and vegetables and grain and things there. They're not there because nobody's putting them there. They're not there because it's not being demanded that they're there. We're not raising the bar. We're not lifting each other up, right? Again, it's about, I believe in wholeheartedly. If we lead with love and kindness, so many good things can happen. Feeding people better food, giving those opportunities, teaching kids what it means. All kids, every kid in every school in this country, a critical lesson about food and food security and the health of our planet and what it means and the role that they can take, right, is so powerful. And I hope that it's something that we can lift up in this country, because I do believe, honestly, in my heart of hearts, it's the fastest way to solve some of these problems.
Definitely.
Yeah. Dude, I'm thanking you for hanging out with me today. I appreciate your time. Will you come back?
I'd love to come back.
And, see, you said in the beginning, you were like, well, I'm glad to be here. So I know you're in. It's like, yeah, he'll come back. That's a good thing.
No, I definitely come back. And I really appreciate, the platform that you've built and created and grown, and getting these messages out is vitally important. And, the people who do this, whether it's written form or video or podcast, whatever it is, we're all on the same team here. We are all trying to get this message out. So I appreciate what you do, Todd. And thank you for having me on.
That's absolutely my pleasure. It's been an honor, and you're absolutely right. I hope everybody keeps talking. I don't care how you do it. Just get talking, and let's get someplace. Let's get someplace for the betterment of our planet and our country. I'm down. Sign me up. I know where we're signing up. I don't even know who's in charge of the sign-up sheet. That's how confused we are, but I'll sign it. I'm in. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Everybody, thanks for listening and being a part of the conversation. Like I say all the time, I'm not going to tell you what to think, but I hope we got you to think today and make some decisions and to look things up on the Google machine and come up with your own opinion about how you value food in this country and why you value. Take time, put some energy to that. I'm telling you, it will change our country. It'll change our youth. It'll change this climate. It'll do all the things we want to talk about doing the fastest. I really firmly believe that. So thanks, Max, for being here. Thanks, everybody. Don't forget, check us out on social media, TLC_Todd-versation. I'm on there. You know why I'm on social media, Max?
Why is that?
Because that's where all the cool kids are, and that's where I'm hanging. That's where I hang out with all the cool kids. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Appreciate it. Remember, go inspire somebody. It's incredibly important. Take care.